Thinking Basketball Podcast. My name is Ben. Welcome back to another episode. It is March 3rd, 2026, and I am, Cody, just absolutely excited today to talk to you. It's the highlight of my week, but really, I mean, we've got 8 teams shaping up right now in the playoff picture. I counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which means in the semifinals of each conference, if the brackets break the right way, we could have just an absolute bloodbath. We could have World War III. I guess you can't say that now. We could have a real doozy of a conference semifinals in the second round of the playoffs if the brackets shape up the right way. How you doing?
It reminds me, I don't remember when it was. Maybe it was 22 or 23. There was a moment in the Eastern Conference where it was like, no matter what, we're going to get a matchup where Joel Embiid is in there. You got the Cavs at their peak. You got Giannis at his peak. And I thought there was one more in there that looked like a really interesting team. And then I'm pretty sure most of them got injured. Maybe it was the Celtics. Yeah. Maybe it was and I'm pretty sure like 3 of the 4 teams then sustained a huge injury. And it was like, oh, that was really anticlimactic. So I'm hoping that we can actually have like this great buildup for, I feel like I've seen some discourse where people are like, the season's kind of meh. And I'm like, maybe the season is meh because we're seeing that the playoffs are going to be so exciting and we just need the playoffs to start at this point, right? So I think the season itself has actually been pretty interesting, but now we're starting to see that it's like, oh, wow, we might see some pretty interesting stuff happen in the playoffs. And I think we're all just really excited about that at this point.
I think the season's been pretty good. I think the start was really sluggish for me, very meh. But when you look at some of the emerging teams, you look at some of the runs, I mean, the Spurs and the Pistons and young teams. And I think if I had to guess at what people are really trying to kind of the je ne sais quoi of what they're trying to put their fingers on there, Cody, yes, we got to get French off early in the show today. I would guess it's the idea that the league is in a changing of the guard moment, and that anytime in sports and especially basketball, culturally, when there's a transition, basketball fans are very slow to crown anything new that can exist on the pedestal that they put their idols on. So whether it's a new player or a new MVP or a new team, in the moment as it's happening, there's this sort of inauthenticity. This you're not legitimately as good as the 16 Warriors or the 96 Bulls or whatever. Meanwhile, when the 16 Warriors were starting the year, everyone's like, you're not as good as the 96 Bulls. And when the 96 Bulls started the year 41-3, every time I went to a dinner party, my uncle in Boston, who was a longtime Celtics fan, would be like, you should have seen the 86 Celtics. They would wipe the floor with these guys. And then enough time goes by and it gets solidified, and my guess is there's some of that happening. And so basically we're not on sturdy ground right now. The earth is shifting beneath our feet. And as a result of that, it creates this sensation. But I look at these 8 teams we have right now, and I think of like 2019, where we had the Rockets and the Warriors in the second round in like a battle for the soul of basketball style play at that point. And then the Eastern Conference in the second round, we had the Philadelphia 76ers and the Toronto Raptors going to Game 7 with the Kawhi Leonard shot out of the corner. On the other side of the bracket, we had, was that the Bucks and the Celtics, and the Bucks waiting? And I mean, that's the kind of playoff run that I think we could be set up for this year. So to me, it is building up.
And I think it was really interesting where we start the season and the prevailing conversation was like, oh, are the OKC Thunder going to break the wins record? Is this just going to be what happens? Are they just going to walk their way to the finals? And then, you know what? Honestly, I'm glad they're going through some of these struggles right now in the season. I'm glad that they didn't keep that dominance going as much as they did right away, because it opens the door for some of these interesting ways that we go about. Now, of course, I want everyone on the Thunder to be healthy, and I never want injury-related stuff to be the reason that teams aren't able to perform at their peak. But I do think the fact that the Thunder's record is now at least in the ballpark of the Pistons and the Spurs and the Celtics and things like that makes it quite a bit more interesting. It's not as much like, all right, marker, they're going to win the championship, it's all good. There's some other stuff that could happen, right? There's some dominoes that have yet to fall, Ben, going into these playoffs. And I know the playoffs are still, a month and a half away at this point, but still, it is too far. It's way too far.
Yeah. I think that's also the tricky part is we've been blessed with some great games that I want to talk about today between these top teams finally matching up, and there's playoff implications in these games, but it's also that sluggish part of the season, as we've talked about, where guys are missing time and teams are rebuilding and there are not so great games mixed in. And so it's like you see these great games and you go, oh my God, I want the playoffs to start in 2 weeks. And as you said, it's 5 or 6 weeks to the end of the season. And then we have the play-in tournament week. And I think the playoffs tip off about April 16th or whatever it is, April 18th or something like that. So yes, the Oklahoma City thing is interesting to me, Cody, because there wasn't the excitement, it felt like, when they started 24-1. It was like they were already kind of like disliked. And of course we saw did you see the Lou Dort gate trip with Jokic?
Yeah. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Well, did you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, the play is dirty, right? But I think
dirty. Yeah.
So, no, this is great. This is where I want to go with this, because I almost feel like there's a counter narrative that I've heard. But people have been talking, Ben. There's some clips of Jokic where he's basically riding some rebounders against the Jazz, and then people are like, actually, Jokic has been dirty for a very long time. And it's interesting because I think you hear terms like Bush League, you hear dirty and things like that. I think we need to establish some kind of a hierarchy of terms when we're talking about dirty players, because if you call a play dirty or a player dirty, not all dirty players like exist in the same level, right? So if we look at like that Dort play, right, it exists in the dirty continuum somewhere. But to you, here's what I want to ask you: how dirty of a play was that to you? Like, would you give that like a top tier dirty play, or is that somewhere else? And would you call it Bush League, or is Bush League like something else? Like, what's going on with Dort's play?
I thought, okay, boy, we talked about this for 2 seconds right before recording. I thought it was Bush League. And then you're saying Bush League is even higher than dirty. There's a scale of dirty. To me, Bush League is a little cheap. It's kind of something you'd see in a men's league where no one's watching or something. And dirty is like legitimate, the scarlet letter that you're branded with for going way out of bounds. So I don't know. I don't know which one I would call that.
So if we go back, I think it's either the first or second round of the playoffs. I think it's the second round, 2011. The Mavericks and the Lakers are playing. And the Mavericks are about to shut out, like about to sweep the Lakers, right? And this is after winning the championship. And there's a play where JJ Barea drives to the basket and Andrew Bynum steps in and just full like forearm to his torso midair just shoves him away. And I forgot who the announcer was. I forgot who the commentator was. But watching the replay, he like very emphatically was like, that's absolutely Bush League. And like the emphasis he said when he said it, I was like, wow, that's the top. Like if you call a play Bush League, that's about as dirty of a play as you can get. So that always stuck out in my mind based simply on that one call for that one play. So in my mind, Bush League is about as dirty of a play as you can get, but I don't know if that's incorrect.
Yeah, I always thought about it the other way around. I don't know. Maybe we'll have to take a poll. I always thought that dirty was the worst offense that on the dirty scale. I thought that was pure 100% dirtiness. So I don't know. Yeah, I never thought about this before. Cody, before we go any further, we have to thank our sponsor of today's show, the one and only SeatGeek app. They've been very kind to us, and you know how much I'm a big fan of SeatGeek. They got everything. They got all these basketball games we're talking about. You can see the Spurs. You can see the Knicks. You can see whatever role player you want. They have concerts. They have festivals. They have my little hidden gem is the parking. I like to use. Have you used SeatGeek for the parking before?
I haven't. Do they like highlight the best parking spots for a particular event that's going on?
Exactly. You're at an event or a venue, you open it up, it shows you all the little prices with parking around. Of course, when you're in the arena, I'm a big fan of previewing the seats. They have that 1 to 10 scale, so you know how good the deal is. They get the green and yellow coating, so you can tell when you have a really good ticket in the arena. And for you guys, podcast listeners, we have a special code, Thinking 2026. For 10% off your next set of tickets on SeatGeek. That's Thinking 2026. You get 10% off any tickets with that promo code. We will put that link in the show description so it automatically loads into your account when you open it up later. And it's a great way to support the show. So thanks to SeatGeek.
So when I think about like the dirtiest kinds of plays, I'm always thinking of, you undercut a guy or somebody's in the air, transition, you hit them, they have their momentum going. You get those situations where somebody grabs the rim on a dunk and then they flip over and land or something like that.
Yeah.
To me, those are about as dirty of plays as you can get. So in that way, I don't necessarily view Dort's play as being like the highest level of dirty plays you could see, but it certainly was a dirty play. And, I do think that there seems to be some kind of a repeated history of Dort using his physicality in some dirty plays like that throughout the season.
Yeah, I could go dirty on Dort and Bush League on the who was it boxing out Jokic, the Keontae George.
Yeah,
hold the arms and then get. I don't think there's a rule in the NBA technically addressing this, but I mean he squats like down to his knees. He's like, I'm just going to get below your waist and just leverage you from your knees. It's kind of a new technique. Maybe we'll see that. Maybe this generation will be like, that's a great hack that they haven't put in the rules. So we should do that. All right, moving on.
Well, did you learn? Moving aside from that particular play, is there anything that you took away from that game? Because I think that's Shea's first game back after missing quite a bit of time. Jokic has come back. He's not fully apex Jokic a bit. I think we're seeing some issues with the turnovers. The touch isn't there. You look at some of the numbers, and I think across the board, his efficiency isn't there. And I think overall they have a bit more turnover issues as well. So with all of that context, what did you walk away from that game thinking?
This is the Denver OKC game?
Yes.
That game went into overtime or something?
Did it? I think it
yes.
did.
I guess this is my way of saying I watched this entire game and I can't remember what happened in the game at all. So there you go.
Okay. I would say
yes, please tell me your takeaways. It might trigger a memory. All I have memorized from this game is that play and Jokic's face afterwards.
Can we use this game as a jumping off point for a different conversation?
Please. Yes,
so
rescue me.
I was watching like Hartenstein out there, right? And the first thing, I think I sent you a text and I'm like, this is a little thinking. Like this is clearly a guy that just does so many things out there. But then, of course, the much maligned Dort, right? You have Cason Wallace out there. You have Alex Caruso. I'm like, man, this team is just stacked with role players. Like even beyond just the high end talent that they have, their role guys play their roles so well. And they're probably some of the best at their particular roles in the NBA. And I always think back, I don't know if this goes into like a Robert Horry All-Stars type of thing, but when I'm thinking about what a role player actually is, I kind of got lost in that definition, Ben. So I kind of wanted to bring that here today and think about what your opinion is. Do you have a thought on like what actually defines a role player versus say like a sub all-star, or can a role player be a sub all-star or an all-star? Are these like categories that are separate from each other?
Boy, that's a really juicy question that I feel like we've touched on over the years when we do sub all-stars or when we pick like a top 25 under 25 or something, and we get to these points with player categorization and we say, all right, if you're not that valuable but you're the type of player to have the ball a lot and you might score 20 or 25 points a game, and I'm not saying you're a 22 point per game scorer and you're just terrible and you're bleeding value everywhere and you're killing your team. I'm saying there's some nuance to it, and I don't think you're a top 50 player, but I also don't think you're terrible. Is that a role player because your value isn't as good as the players that move the needle? Or are you not a role player by definition because what we really mean by that in basketball culture is we mean, number one, offense only. There's like no such thing as role players on defense. Nobody has the ball on defense. And so two, we're really talking about on offense when you have the ball. And is it a thing where you have limited skills? You can't do that much with the ball. And even I guess if you had the ball, you could be a role player if you're like a Brevin Knight type, Eric Snow type point guard where your skill set is limited. So the first place I think I go, Cody, is with more of a specialization or limited skill set, especially when it comes to exerting pressure on the defense with the basketball. I guess you can exert pressure without the basketball as well. So technically it might not be an on-ball thing, but that's where my mind goes. What about you?
So I'm going to push aside big men for a second because I actually think big men are kind of their own category in terms of role players.
Yeah, I had that thought too. Yeah.
It's so crazy because like almost by definition, a lot of these rim protecting bigs that are lob threats, but not quite like Tyson Chandler, just all feel kind of like role players, right? So when I think about, perimeter players, wing players, point guards, things like that, the one category I first go to is like you have an extremely limited skill set, but you are so much better at basically anyone else that would do those skills that your impact can and maybe can actually approach like a sub all-star level. And I think the first person I think about is Danny Green, right? Like you go back to peak Danny Green in the mid 2010s. I don't know if there's a better player that you would need that's like, hey, you're gonna be like the fifth option on offense. You're gonna move around and hit open threes. Maybe in the finals you'll catch fire and break some kinds of records. But also you're just gonna be a defensive wizard on the perimeter. You're gonna chase down people in transition. You're gonna try and lock up people. You're gonna use your hands in a lot of really disruptive ways. But you can't handle the ball ever. You're never going to run a pick and roll. You're never going to do a second side attack. Like none of those things. You are literally doing these like two things. And he basically does them better than anyone else in that role. And you could argue that's like, okay, maybe he got to sub all-star impact, but you would never say he's like a sub all-star because unless he's in a role where that exact role is necessary for the team, you're not going to extract anything close to that amount of value, right? And so I think you have some players like, I don't know, like Julian Champagny for the Spurs. Mm-hmm. Like he feels at least kind of in that vein where it's like, you're not going to ask him to do too much, but like the shooting ability, maybe some of the other minor things, he adds a little bit of value. He's not nearly what Danny Green is. Maybe guys like Sam Merrill for the Cavaliers, you get these guys that are just like outlier shooters, but beyond that, I don't know, you're fine enough out there, but you're not going to be creating or anything. And it's just basically your one outlier skill that helps you be on the court so much. So to me, that's like the most popular category of role player.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I think that ties back to what I was thinking about, a theme of pressuring the defense or being able to pressure and create. They're very similar interrelated concepts. So if you can't do that on your own, then the word I would think of is you're a play finisher. Okay. And so then the question becomes, is that really what we're zooming in on when we talk about these role players and what it means to be a role player? Are you more primarily a play finisher than a play starter and creator? Do you buy that? Is that a framework that sounds reasonable to work within?
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think there are guys that are so good at a variety of categories, like Sean Marion, for instance, at his peak was a play finisher. Right. Like you look at all of the numbers and whatever else with Steve Nash, and they're just so much better when Nash is on the court and stuff. But you wouldn't say that he was a role player, right? Like he was sub all-star level type of player because he had a little bit more juice in terms of play finishing. So it's almost like a more limited play finishing ability. But I think that's a categorization that makes a lot of sense. Can you be a role player and a play creator? Like does like Cam Thomas count in that sort of role?
I mean, I feel like no. I feel like that's like saying Vinny Johnson is a role player.
I wrote him down. I wrote down Vinny Johnson. Is Vinny Johnson not a role player in your mind?
He's not. I think one of the reasons we're talking about this is because I've never really tried to draw tight lines around this boundary. So, but I think if we go to how the term has historically been used, I'm not sure Vinny Johnson would qualify as a role player. Number one, he created offense for Detroit as like a backup point guard. And number two, he created offense for himself all the time. And he was a very explosive scorer. And his numbers per possession, or when Isaiah and Joe Dumars weren't out there, he's going to have much bigger scoring numbers. I don't think in the old days we would think of a 20 or 22 point scorer who's also setting up teammates and running the offense as a role player by any stretch of the imagination. So, the Marion one is harder for me. The Marion one is harder because is Marion not a role player because he's also a great defender? And the classic one that gets brought up in the Marion vein, I feel like, is Draymond Green, where my response to that for the last decade has been, yes, Draymond Green's a role player. His role is being better than everyone else at basketball. That's his role. But I mean, obviously we know what they mean. They mean that this is someone who cannot exist near the tip of the spear on offense. He has to be an auxiliary part and plug in next to the actual pressure points and stars of the offense. And that just brings me back to pressure points, but it also brings me to what you were getting at with Marion, which is like, why would we describe all-stars as role players? And Marion and Draymond Green and many great defenders like that are Derrick White this season. If they had no defensive chops, I think it's reasonable to look at a lot of those players and go, they're more like role players on offense. I don't know where we draw the line. Maybe they fall on the other side of the line because Draymond's, such a good ball handler for his size, legitimately plays point guard, is an elite passer, et cetera, et cetera. Sean Marion, to your point, is so athletic that he can finish out of the corner. He can finish on cuts. He can finish on rebounds. He can finish on lobs. He can finish on the break. Maybe we draw the line and say they're not. But I wonder what happens with those players if we remove defense and we're zooming in on their offense only and not their overall value. Is it weird to call an all-star a role player?
That's really interesting. I think Draymond in that case, where he's kind of a system unto himself, right? Like obviously he plays with one of the most system unto himself players ever in Steph Curry, right? But what Draymond Green is able to unlock feels above and beyond what you would call a role player. Like a role is like, hey, we need to slot in some guys to take on these particular roles, and you're just going to kind of do those things. But Draymond, it's like, wow, look at how much things we can unlock on offense because of your particular skill set, right? The way that he can push in transition, the way that he can run the dribble handoff game, the way that he can attack a power play in a pick and roll or something like that. That all feels, even if the impact itself isn't to the level of like a sub all-star or something like that, that feels advanced enough where I wouldn't quite say it's a role player.
Yeah, it feels maybe too central to what the offense is trying to do. Mm-hmm. That's maybe how I would think of it. I mean, this is a really tough one. Would we call Rondo a role player?
Oh, wow. Oh, that's a really interesting one.
Yeah, and it gets even harder because whatever your answer is, then I can drill down. If you say yes, then we can say, well, what year did he? What year? Or sorry, if you say no, he's not a role player, then I say, well, what year did he not become a role player? Because certainly when he was like a rookie, I mean, maybe you're just getting at the fact that if you're out there and you have the ball a lot and you're making decisions that even if you're playing like Brevin Knight and not exerting a lot of pressure, then to your point about Draymond, you're still centralized enough in the offense. I don't know. I'm not trying to get lost in the sauce here. I'm just saying this has always been the hardest part for me about defining a role player and actually like trying to say like who are the best role players ever? Well, I don't know, because where does a role player start? Like if they're really good, then do we not think of them as role players anymore? Robert Horry comes to mind, but Robert Horry is also a player that I think sneakily might have been like a multi-time sub all-star throughout his career. And a lot of that has to do with all of these other skills that don't involve primacy and pressuring defenses. Like Robert Horry fills up the checkbox there, right? He's a very good defender. He's a good passer. He's a good shooter. He's a pretty good finisher with his size. He's a big who stretches the floor and gives you spacing. He's a high IQ pseudo little thing type of player at the power forward position back then. So, does the totality of that is, if that's still like a top 50 or top 40 player, can you be a role player? I've never been able to overcome these hurdles, Cody, and maybe today you can help me.
So, I mean, that's the other thing. It's like we have those specialization role players, but then you have the players that's like they do it all, but you're not sure how high the high end of their impact is. And then it's like, all right, so are they just kind of a role player? So another team I want to zoom in on here, right? There's a cluster of 3 guys, and I kind of want to throw them out to you. And I think 2 of them landed in the sub all-star category this year, right? I want to go to the Knicks for a second because I was watching the Knicks and Spurs play, and 3 of the most important players in that game were OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, and Josh Hart, right? And I'm watching them, and I'm like, man, like these 3 guys are just such a core of role players that are so good. And I'm like, is it offensive to call OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges role players? Like, are they better than that? And then I was thinking about Josh Hart. And I'm like, well, Josh Hart feels like another step down. So he feels like the definition of a do-it-all kind of role player, where, again, he's not going to be like Draymond where he becomes a system unto himself, but you can plug him into a team, and it's like, well, he's going to rebound like a maniac. He's going to push in transition. He's developing a nice little dribble handoff game, right? Like a very mini type of Draymond Green in that sort of sense. And I'm like, that feels like a role player, but is it offensive to call the other 2 guys role players then?
Yeah, maybe you're talking me into just getting rid of role player altogether as a terminology, because it just feels like a false dichotomy. It feels like you're taking these gray areas of players that aren't obvious offensive superstars, that don't exert a ton of primary pressure on defenses, and then you're leaving all these other things that we spend all our time talking about, all the little things, all the IQ and the communication and the strength and the feel, your shooting, your off-ball movement, your cut, your rebounding, your help defense, your man defense, all of these things that make up a player's value that are so critical to, who's good and who's successful in today's NBA and even historically. And you're just going, well, let's just simplify it to like how many shots a dude takes a game in essence. I'm now oversimplifying, but that's maybe what the conversation is revealing to me, is that it's almost impossible to really draw a line in there, because maybe it's just a false dichotomy. Maybe it's just too superficial of a way to think about players.
I think the issue too with the role player terminology is I think people see it as almost offensive. Like it's pejorative. Like it's like, oh, you're a role player. It's like, well, that means you don't think I'm like a star player. It thinks I'm just kind of like a bit player.
You don't think all those people on the internet were complimenting Draymond when they called him a role player over and over again?
No, I'll tell you what, I don't think they were making like a little statue. It's like, oh, you're the best role player ever. Good job. This is amazing. But to that point, I was trying to play with the thinkingbasketball.net database a little bit. And I was looking at offensive load, and I was controlling for a little bit. And I took like sub 30 offensive load. I'm like, this feels right.
That's exactly what I did. This is get out of my computer, Cody.
This is amazing.
I did a sub 30 filter right as you were just about 10 minutes ago. I did a sub 30 filter. Keep going.
That's incredible. So I'm going through there, and guess who pops up? I think both OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges are in that. And I'm like, man, that I don't know. Something on one hand, I'm trying to say I don't think it's offensive to be a role player. On the other hand, it feels like I'm being offensive calling OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges role players. So maybe you're right, but I don't know, because it feels weird to just abolish the term role player, because it defines so well these guys like Danny Green. It defines these guys like Alex Caruso, and I don't know. I don't know if we just don't need a term for those kinds of guys, but it feels like we do.
It does. It does feel like we do, and it's such a simple. And let's flip it. It almost feels complimentary when you look at Hakeem Olajuwon's Rockets and you go, they had great role players. And then you just start checking them off, and you're just like, of course, Mario Elie, he was a great role player. Of course, Robert Horry, he was a great role player. Just it's a word. The Spurs over the years, they did such a great job of surrounding their big three with role players. And I know they had this weird period where they tried to get, players in their Renaissance years, Michael Finley's going to come in and Richard Jefferson's going to come in. And guess what? That's when the Spurs weren't good. It didn't work. The rest of the time, we're talking about the Danny Greens of the world, and we're talking about the Bruce Bowens of the world, and Jaren Jackson Sr., right? So it feels like when you have a successful ecosystem and a great championship team, that then it almost becomes a compliment to say, hey, these surrounding players, they deserve more credit, because the totality of these role players, maybe it's not moving the needle as much as the top two stars, but Kobe and Shaq ain't doing diddly if they don't have good role players. And in the same vein, the 2011 Miami Heat, they were just out there on an experimental island with like, what if we who was cut at the center position and the point guard position last week? Who was cut? Who's on the chopping block? We will take Zydrunas Ilgauskas. We'll take Dexter Pittman, whoever. I don't know if Dexter Pittman was on that team, but you get the idea, right? Like
Mike Bibby was one of those. Joel Anthony.
Yes, thank you, Mike Bibby. Yeah. So you just clearly need good role players, and part of for me at least, and one of the things we try to celebrate on this podcast and with all our video content, part of the beauty of a great team is when it all connects and it creates an ecosystem, and you need the role players connecting to the stars and buying in. I just have a hard time with where the heck you draw the actual line, I guess, when you're forced to. It's like a what's that paradox with the Schrodinger's cat? It's like Schrodinger's role player. I can't figure out when you actually look at it. I'm like, I don't know. Yeah.
And I'm just going to bounce around to all kinds of teams. We've talked about the Celtics like a ton throughout here, and I'm glad you brought up
the 2026 Boston Celtics.
The 2026 Boston Celtics.
We haven't talked about them enough. They're absolutely. I can't believe the season they're having.
Have you heard of this guy named Derrick White on the team?
Okay, yes. So if you remember, and depending on when you're listening to this, the Derrick White video might be out. We did this 2-part series on impact is not production, and in the first part we looked at someone with massive production that outshines their impact in Jalen Johnson. In the second part, we're doing the exact opposite, which is someone who has what looks like terrible production traditionally, and then their impact massively outshines their production. And I chose Derrick White for this exact reason. And we start the video by zooming in on all his offensive weaknesses that make people traditionally balk at the idea that he's an all-star. And then we have another like 11 and a half minutes of him dominating the game in every other area. And I was thinking about him this conversation. I don't know, Cody, would you call him, forget the defense. Let's do ourselves a favor. Okay. Let's forget the defense.
Okay.
Just, we're talking about offensive players. Is there a clear line of demarcation for you where if we listed all these offensive players in the league right now, or zoomed in on a team like the Celtics, where you go, okay, Jaylen Brown is not a role player. He's a star. And Jason Tatum could be back very soon. He's a star. Is Peyton Pritchard an offensive role player?
It feels like in this conversation, is he a step above? It feels like he's better than that, because if you're putting Derrick White versus Peyton Pritchard offensively together, you'd probably put Pritchard above him, right?
Wait a second. I just broke my own brain thinking this through. If you take this to its logical conclusion, Cody, the better and better the team, the better players are going to become a role player. So Andre Iguodala goes to the Warriors, and he's got to play next to Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant, and he becomes a role player. And if you take certain stars in the NBA and you put them on Team USA, they become a role player on that team. And so Peyton Pritchard on this Celtics team without Jason Tatum is very clearly not a role player to me. He is a key. He is. I think they have 2.5 players right now that can pressure the defense. Jaylen Brown, Peyton Pritchard, and I'll give Derrick White a half in their offense, because he can do some. In the video, I refer to him as a backup option, not a secondary option, not like we're skipping at second side and, oh, there's Kyrie Irving. Like literally, like this guy can also run some pick and roll in offense, but don't expect him to exert a ton of pressure. He's just stable. He's low turnovers. He's smart. He makes good decisions, but that's about it. So I'm giving him like 2.5 of those players. If you were to say Peyton Pritchard's a role player, you're saying one of the best offenses we've seen in the 2020s has one star, and then all the other players are role players, including the dude that can cook people for 30 or 35 off the bench every night. That feels weird to me, but also at the same time, we know if we put him on the 2024 Celtics, you would never not call him a role player, right?
Well, not only that, a team that has this good of an offense, that when you take their best player and take him off the court, they still basically have
the same offense.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like that doesn't seem to make sense at all in this conversation. So you almost, I don't know. Here's what I'm going. If I was still a writer, if I was in the blogosphere, I don't even know if blogs exist anymore at this point. But I would almost say that there's multiple categories of role players. So like Derrick White is role player, all-star, right? Like when he's out there, he can play like all-star types of minutes. He can be in all of those situations. And his impact is such that you can bestow upon him all-star status, right? But then also on his same team, two of our favorite role players, right? Ugo Gonzalez, Jordan Walsh. Like I would feel weird calling them the same level of role player as Derrick White. So they're like role player, bench. So I think here in this definition, the point of this though, is if you're called a role player, that means I trust you to get minutes on like a good NBA team, right? But if you're like a role player bench, it means that if I bump you up to like 30 minutes a game and you have to play starter minutes, I'm not 100% convinced that there wouldn't be some shaky things. But if I can throw you out there for 18 minutes, I can trust those 18 minutes that you're going to be doing some good stuff. So I think in this definition, we're reclaiming role player as basically being like, yeah, we have a championship level team. We have a playoff level team. You can get some solid quality minutes and do things that the team needs. Does that make any kind of sense?
Okay, so shouldn't we have a separate term for that? You're saying these are different things. You don't want them in the same category.
Yeah.
So shouldn't we have a separate term for that? I feel like we're making progress here today. Very important stuff. I mean, this is going right to the Basketball Hall of Fame, this conversation. But you also haven't answered my conundrum that I've unearthed for myself to make this even harder. If Peyton Pritchard gets put on the 2024 Celtics behind Porzingis and Al Horford and whoever, don't make me do the whole roster, Tatum and Brown and Drew Holiday and Derek, don't we think of Pritchard coming off the bench as like the seventh man as a role player? Or are we really comfortable honing in on what we talked about with offensive pressure? And we're going, nah, Peyton Pritchard is the Vinnie Johnson of this team, and therefore he's not a role player.
That's so tough because it's the Derrick White on Team USA conundrum, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Derrick White on the Celtics conundrum.
Exactly. Like no matter what, like you just build a really good team. Derrick White should be on that team.
He should be.
And I think that's what we're trying to get to at this point. And I'm just going to say his name, whatever. We're out here. The internet has finally turned to be on our side. But like, if you need somebody to play like a role like that, you'd rather have Derrick White than Luka Doncic. You just would, right? Luka Doncic's role as a player is to be a star offensive player. Like that is his particular role. But somebody like Derrick White's like, you're coming off the bench. You're the third option. You're the fourth option. It doesn't matter. You need to be on this team. Like, to me, that seems to be like the role player archetype of a person is like, when we have a bunch of other talent, we need to have somebody like you out there because you can just kind of slot in all of these different ways. So again, I think what I'm trying to get at here is being a role player is a really good thing. As to what you're saying, I'm still kind of dodging what you're trying to present. And that's because I don't really have a good answer for you.
My takeaways from this conversation today are that we should have separate language to describe the players that are really, really limited and therefore on both ends to a sense, and therefore are only going to get minutes. Let me take that back. Very, very limited on offense and good enough on defense to get minutes, but not good enough to really move the needle on defense. Like when you mentioned Ugo and Jordan Walsh on the Celtics, they may or may not get playoff minutes. They're going to be at the edge of the playoff rotation, and they're going to be at the edge of the playoff rotation because they're very limited on offense, and their defense, which is why they play, is not good enough to demand that they play all the time. Whereas Draymond Green, is one of the best defenders of all time and one of the best defenders of the 21st century. So you're never going to be like, maybe we shouldn't have Draymond play 35 minutes in this finals game 7. That is a big takeaway for me.
Can I ask about another player then?
Of course, please. We need to name more players.
Well, what would you say? This is a really
contractually obligated to name more players. Yeah, then I have a couple for you.
There should be a counter for us that's just like the year, like the decade the player played in, and who we talked about, and just see how many. This is a key episode right now. Mm-hmm. What do you think about somebody like Amen Thompson?
Yeah. He is one of those very good he's the Ben Simmons category. He's very, very good defender and extremely limited / can cause you to pay a tax on offense. Those are interesting players. Yeah.
Is that a role player then?
I don't know. I've given up at this point with the role player. Yeah. I mean, someone in our audience was asking about like Jaren Jackson Jr. and Lauri Markkanen as role, but I'm like, if those guys are role players, I don't know. We got to retire this term permanently. I mean, Lauri exerts a ton of pressure on defenses with just one super skill, basically the combination of his size and his shooting. Jaren Jackson Jr. can exert some pressure, but he's, C+, B- and all these kinds of skills versus you want offensive primary guys to be B+, A- in those same skills. So I don't know. I just would like to take this opportunity to say, circling back to the top of the show, and then I want to talk about some of these teams and games. I think part of the excitement of this season is we don't talk enough about how incredible the Celtics season is. And I think it's very similar to the OKC thing last year, where they're not really the darlings of anything. They're not really a nationally loved franchise. They've had some weird history in the last 5 years. They have a title, but it wasn't a title that everyone was jazzed up about. Sometimes just the casual fans, they get jazzed up about certain titles. Whether it's the Toronto run in 2019 or the Warriors claiming their 4th title in their dynasty, or even the Nuggets winning their first with Jokic. There's sort of a pop and an excitement to certain titles as the season crescendos to an end. And the Celtics, who was like, oh yeah, the Celtics are way better than Dallas and other teams are injured. And of course they want a title. Look at their roster. Their roster is ridiculous. They're a 60-win team without Jason Tatum. Yeah. I mean, come on. But this is one of the great stories, I think, of the 2020s, and credit to Joe Mazzulla. And we've talked about it, but just to acknowledge in the media space, wherever those conversations are having, however fans are engaging, that there are these stories. They just might not necessarily have the fresh and the pop and the sexiness that the San Antonio one does, where it's awesome to see a young team take that leap and move with all these young players into title contention.
Can I put a bow on a thought that I just had about role players?
We're back on role players. I can't shake this.
No, you can't. Yeah. I have to revisit this one. This is important. I'm not going to help necessarily with come up with a good definition of role player. Then we can leave it behind. But I did think about a key definition. I think the issue is when we just describe players that aren't very good as role players. I think that's incorrect, right? I think the point that we are getting to is if you call a player a role player, they are good. Right. This is somebody that should probably get minutes on a good team, But if they're just somebody that doesn't have a lot of skills and probably shouldn't be getting minutes because they're not a very good basketball player, that's not a role player. A role player isn't just somebody that's getting not a lot of minutes, right? So I think that's just one final differentiation that I want to have. But yeah, I think it's interesting. Oh, sorry, did you want to say something?
I had a question. I just had a question for you based on some of the things we've talked about.
Yeah.
But go ahead. I'll ask you in a second.
No. Ask me this.
Okay. Well, we've talked. You brought up Derrick White. We've talked about him. I mentioned the video. I'm wondering where you would rank Derrick White right now as a defensive guard in the NBA in 2026.
Whew. That's an excellent question. So we get into such I'm afraid of category fraud with stuff. So can I ask some players?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thompson twins, are they guards?
I would say no.
Okay. Dort and Wallace.
Guard. Caruso guard.
Man. Yeah.
Oklahoma City has your top three.
This is the issue. And this is the whole point of the Thinkies podcast, is when we talk about somebody that's good at defense, there's just so many different things that you want to highlight defensively. And so when you get to the totality of overall, how good is this guy? Yes. I think that's really tough. But I think if we're trying to do a totality thing, I think Wallace is probably better.
Casey Wallace. Okay.
I think Casey Wallace is probably a better defender. I think Alex Caruso is a better defender.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's just because I don't know. Is he in the same ballpark as Lou Dort? I guess you're right. It's just White versus the Thunder players. But
okay, can I give you a couple other guard candidates?
Yeah, say some other guys.
I'm just going to do this just so everyone knows. This is just based on their defensive estimated plus minus from dunks and threes, which is an all-in-one metric. And, this isn't my rankings or anything. I'm just going to give you other guards that are in contention for this spot. Jalen Suggs.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Dyson Daniels.
Okay. Do you want me to give you an answer, like a quick answer, and then you just name them?
I'm gonna say one more because I think we kind of start running out of other guard candidates. Chris Dunn.
I do like
all these players are up there in defensive EPM. I'm not going to say they're ahead of Derrick White. There's only a couple guards ahead of Derrick White, and they seem to play for Oklahoma City. But
here's the issue in terms of guard defenders and Derrick White and things like that. I actually think he's probably on the back end if we're talking about point of attack defense. Right, I think a lot of these, like Chris Dunn, I'd rather have him as a point of attack guy. Jalen Suggs, I'd rather have as a point of attack guy. Same with basically all of these guys. Probably not Dyson Daniels. I'd probably have White over him. But in the rim protection stuff as a small, the nail helping off ball kind of disruption stuff, he's just teleporting and doing everything. He's is he at the top? I don't necessarily know that, but he's probably 1, 2, or 3. In terms of that. So when you take it all together, I'll just say that he's at least in the mix with all these guys.
Okay. What a non-answer, Cody.
Dyson Daniels is the bottom of that list in my mind.
Yes.
That's what I would say.
I would agree with that. I think you can make a very strong argument for White in the top 2. I think you can make a very strong. Yeah, because he's in here with these 3 Oklahoma City guys you mentioned. You have Jalen Suggs. And is there anyone else that I forgot? I agree that Daniels is not that. I don't think Chris Dunn is better.
Okay.
I think the thing that's fascinating about White and so hard to, as you said, to summarize in the totality of player value in an NBA defensive player right now is he's weaker than all these OKC guys on ball. He's probably weaker than Jalen Suggs on ball, but maybe outside of Caruso, he's better than everyone in team. And is team more valuable for a perimeter player than on ball or point of attack? He reminds me of Draymond in how good he is at recognizing threats, how quick he is at recognizing threats. His hustle and motor are off the charts. I mean, now we're just doing a full-on teaser for the Thinkies, so I'll pause at this point. But I think this is the best defense I've ever seen Derrick White play. And it kind of has a essence of a guard type Draymond Green season. Leave aside for a second the fact that Draymond could lock people up in man defense at many positions. It's just very hard to try to figure out, would you rather have case in Wallace in that situation. But I think you can make a strong case for, if they did the old all defensive voting, I think you can make a really strong case he's first team this season. But I think there's no more positions for all defensive voting, right?
Is that the case? Is that
Yeah,
real?
I think you can just have 5 big men now, as long as they play 75 games. I mean, 65 games, 5 big men and 65 games. Those are the new rules.
That's the worst. That's not even remotely what should happen. I think Jalen Suggs is a pretty tremendous team defensive player as well. That's the thing. I think all of these guys have. I think you're right about Chris Dunn and Dyson Daniels being at the bottom, probably. Point of attack, again, no thank you spoilers, but I really like Chris Dunn's point of attack defense. But yeah, I think at least saying he's in the mix with those guys, first of all, number one, triangulates our whole conversation or puts a point on our conversation about role players and what the Thunder have on their team, that we just like throw out 3 of their guys. And it's like, well, these are 3 of the best guard defenders in the NBA, right? But 2, just like there's not an enormous list, and it's probably like 5 or 6 guys, and White is very clearly on the upper half of that particular list.
Okay. Some of the games that we wanted to get to, or some of the implications from these teams meeting up. You mentioned Knicks and Spurs and the Thunder and the Nuggets game. My general takeaway from a lot of these Nuggets matchups right now, and we can pull up a few of the key ones in a second, but my general takeaway is that they're looking a little flat right now. And, it's weird because Jamal Murray's played so well this season and he continues to have good games in these situations. Nikola Jokic is Nikola Jokic, although he's got the wrist thing, so he can't shoot like 85% near the basket right now. I don't know how much that matters. And then you look down the roster and Aaron Gordon is not back. And I'm just like, please, can I get Aaron Gordon on the Nuggets so I can actually get an inventory of what's happening? Cam Johnson's not playing very well. Is that injury? Is that because he hasn't been integrated back in the lineup? Peyton Swatson has been out with the hamstring injury because, apparently everyone gets soft tissue injuries now because of the cutting and the 5 strides, the Euro slaloming where you're going back and forth and dragging your feet all over the court. And that's not how people should move. I don't know, but for Denver, that's where I'm at. I just need to see them healthy and want to kind of get a good feeling about them before we actually get into the playoff run.
So I think, to your point, especially about Peyton Swatson, about Aaron Gordon, who, again, we could revisit the role player conversation. We're not going to, but we could with those 2 kinds of guys. When you just look at the totality of the season, Murray and Jokic have been on the court together for 1,200 minutes, plus 11 net rating. So you look at that and you're like, oh, that's championship level stuff. You love seeing your duo looking like that, right? But if you look at Murray and Jokic when they're on the court, when both Watson and Gordon are not on the court, when they're on the bench, it's about 400 minutes. So, you have somewhat of a sample. It's not as healthy as 1,200 minutes, but 400 minutes, they're a shade under +6 together, right? And when you think about the Murray-Jokic combination, you just expect a double-digit net rating when they're out there. They're just killing teams. But as you can see, like the lack of some of these role players that add some of that oomph, like the dynamism that Jokic and Gordon had together, the way that they could play together, the way that Gordon could slot in, again, with some of his limited creation abilities, with his ability to kind of play a Sean Marion light off ball and that kind of stuff. Peyton Watson, of course, developing defensively in a strong way and offensively. It cuts away from all of that. And of course, Jokic, like you just said, the turnovers, the fact that he still kind of has this injury that's hampering him. As they are, like if they entered the playoffs right now, I'd be pretty low on this team. So I think that's me saying that I don't know how much I want to change on the Nuggets because there's a lot of variables that will hopefully change in the next month and a half.
Yeah, that's where I am. I mean, the Minnesota game, it's like that was another one where Minnesota just, I thought, sort of smacked them around for most of the night. And then you go, okay, so 3 straight years, 4 straight years, Denver is not going to have an easy time with Minnesota. But to your point, all the players aren't there. All the horses aren't there. Can we say all the horses aren't there when we talk about Jokic? Is that
he might be angry about that one. He might ride you to the ground for an offensive rebound.
Now, the Spurs-Knicks game was really interesting to me because the Knicks have had this tale of 2 seasons where their defense was atrocious, and then all of a sudden their defense has put up these great numbers for, we can pull it in a second on our stats department, but like the last month or 2, the defense has turned around and looked like it's been near the top of the league. And you look at a game like the Spurs game, I think it was this week, right? Have we talked since that game? I've completely lost track of time.
That was just a couple days ago, I think. That was Sunday, I think, wasn't it?
That was Sunday. That was over the weekend.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, you look at that game, and in that game, the Knicks defense the stuff that they did to me, first of all, Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby were like, hey, we're all defensive level players. And when they play like that, you've made this point so many times before, when they play like that, all of a sudden it completely changes the floor and the ceiling. It completely changes the range of what this defense looks like, protecting the weaknesses of Jalen Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns, right? That's such a big development for them. But also, it was all of the little things in defense that you can just probably control for the most part. Where is my positioning going to be in pick and roll every time? What's my effort? What's my execution? How am I going to push a guy off his spot? How am I going to ride someone into the screen so they can't set the screen at the height they want to set the screen at? And the Knicks defense just was doing a bunch of those little things throughout the game. You add it all up, and we can get into some of the X's and O's if you want, but you add it all up, and it's like you get to the third quarter, and the Spurs are having a really hard time playing Spurs ball. The guards aren't easily breaking down the defenders and getting into the paint, and they're not just having a Wemby dunk fest. And this is, I assume, some of the big changes that the Knicks have made, just being sharper and crisper in all those areas, and then getting this effort from Mikal and OG Anunoby, and it just like completely changes the playoff sort of possibilities of that team, I think.
Well, what I found so interesting about this game is in the first 6-minute stint that Wemby was on the court, the Knicks scored 5 points.
They couldn't score.
5 points, right? And then he goes to the bench, and I think for the rest of the first quarter, I don't remember how it worked out, but they start going on this run. But then Brunson just like uncorks himself. And even when Wemby gets back on the court, like Brunson's really the one that gets the ball rolling. He hits, I think he gets fouled on a three. He gets a couple of and ones or something like that, but Brunson starts being Brunson. And then the Mikal Bridges, I mean, that guy's corner 3-point shooting was insane that particular game. That was a huge reason of what was going on, is Mikal Bridges became like, an all-star offensive player. It was insanity. But to what you were saying, I think the standout defensive performance was OG Anunoby defending Victor Wembanyama. And I don't know if this is hyperbole. It may have been the best defensive performance I've seen against Wemby from an individual player this season. And it comes from all the little things you're seeing. Like there's so many possessions where Wemby's trying to post up or trying to get an elbow touch or something like that, and OG is just denying, right? And OG is strong as an ox, and he is a big dude, right? He's big, 6'8" frame, strong. He's got some length, and he wasn't letting Wemby catch anything easy, right? And to me, I think that really helped kind of disrupt the flow of what the Spurs were trying to do, and him kind of being able to individually handle that kind of thing, kind of the juxtaposing what we saw with Jalen Duren when they were playing the Pistons recently, where he was kind of struggling to pick and roll. OG Anunoby kind of just like vaporized that whole thing. So to me, among all of the amazing shot making and whatever else, OG's performance against Wemby just blew me away.
Yeah, he's a great basketball player. This is what I mean. Whatever happens with that Knicks team, if they make a finals, they win a title, teams like that, when they have great success, you look back, it feels weird to be like, yes, they had Brunson and Cat and then role players. OG Anunoby is not that far away probably from Karl Anthony Towns as an overall impact basketball player. Mikal Bridges is similar and a really good player. So not to go back to the role player thing, but I mean, yeah, OG is absolutely fantastic, and he was huge in that game. Here it is from our stats department. In the last 25 games, Cody, would you like to guess the New York Knicks defensive rating in the last 25 games?
Wait, does this 25 games include like the slide where they lost like 9 of 12 or something like that? Or is it after?
I don't know. I don't know. I could attempt to look that up if we need that answered, but I just know for their last 25 games what their defensive rating is.
I really don't know the answer to this question. League average has to be
115.
Like 115. Yep, 115-ish.
Yeah.
It can't be like mine, but I'm gonna go on the low end. I'm gonna say it's like a 110.
This includes the end of this is incredible. This includes about half of their, losing 9 of 11 stretch to your question.
Okay. 110.
Yeah.
110.
It is 108.
Ooh.
108 defensive rating. That's a better defensive rating than the San Antonio Spurs in the same time frame. That's a better defensive rating than the Oklahoma City Thunder in the same time frame. That's a better defensive rating than the Boston Celtics in the same time frame. Are there any other good defenses in the league?
Wow, you're really trying to catch me. I don't even know what teams are in the league. right now.
Well, you think about that. I have some,
Rockets. The Rockets. What about the Rockets?
The Houston Rockets. Are they still any good? What's going on with them?
They're not bad. They're just not the top of the West right now.
The Rockets, no, they have a 112 offensive rating in that defensive rating in that time span, and they've really struggled. They've played break even.
This is kind of fun. I'm just gonna say, team names, and you give me some numbers. The Wolves, because I thought they won a Rudy Gobert-ish stretch here where their defense was looking pretty spry.
Yes, the Wolves in that stretch have a 114 defensive rating. I'm pretty sure I'm pretty sure the Knicks have the top defensive rating over the last 25 games, which is just absolutely crazy. Since we're doing stats, some fun stats that I heard.
Number one, and that's all we do is just talk about numbers.
That is true. That is true. I don't even watch basketball with the actual images from a camera, like looking at people on pixelated thing. I watch it in like X's and O, like zeros on a like Neo in the Matrix. That's how I watch basketball. Yeah. The San Antonio Spurs right now have 8 players averaging double figures. They would be the first NBA team in history, apparently, to have 8 players averaging double figures. And when I first heard this stat, I was like, that's because these guys are missing games and, they're cheating. Some guy misses 20 games and someone else picks up the scoring. No, it's like their top 8 players are averaging in double figures. In fact, I think if Dylan Harper, he's like 6 minutes behind Luke Cornett or something. If he passes Luke Cornett in minutes, their top 8 players will all average double figures. That'll be the first time that's ever happened in the history of the league. I think that's a pretty cool stat.
That's really unbelievable. 2014 Spurs, what do they have for that? Can I vamp for a second while I just pull up that?
No, they don't. No, they're not even going to be close. The 2014.
You don't think they're going to be close?
No, they're going to
have 8 guys that average 10 points per game.
Yeah, they're going to have Parker, Duncan, Ginobili. After that, it starts to get Kawhi Leonard is 4, and then what do you got? 1 or 2 more, maybe?
The answer is 6. They have 6 guys that average.
Yeah.
You said 6 is pretty solid. Yeah.
Well,
Tony Parker, Duncan, Kawhi, Ginobili, Bellinelli, Patty Mills, and then Danny Green and Boris Diaw were both 9. So at least in the ballpark. But
they were close. 8. They were close. Yeah. I take back what I said. Almost ate it there. Almost bit the big one on that one.
But did this win though for the Knicks? Because we came back on here a week ago. We were extremely excited about what we saw from the Spurs in their game against the Pistons. So now if we're going to react to this single game performance from both the Knicks side or the Spurs side, do you have any big life-altering changes of opinion? Do you have any takeaways that you have going forward in the last month of the season?
Well, I'm interested, the blueprint for how to defend San Antonio has been there for a long time. We've seen...
Does the blueprint have OG Anunoby on your team?
Well, he, as you said, he might have done it the best. But you take a smaller player who has a low center of gravity, who's strong, like Royce O'Neal or somebody like that, and you stick him underneath Wemby, and you try to play him and contain him in that way. And then you can also roam your shot blocker and maybe not tax your center in the same regard. What was interesting about that game, and where I'm going with this, is the Knicks' physicality in that game and their ability to execute on that scheme with someone like OG. I felt like, oh my God, we need more Keldon Johnson minutes or something. We needed more beef. We needed more beef in the game from San Antonio. And that's the first time I can remember during the year having that thought outside of like Wemby's got to get stronger to not get pushed off his spots. Because when it was the lineups that they like to throw out there with Vassell and Champagny and the shooters that they've put out there, along with the meep guards, along with De'Aaron Fox road running and Steph Castle getting downhill, I just felt like they were missing a little strength, and I wonder if that's a subplot. I think there's an entire subplot, Cody, in the playoffs this year with speed versus strength, speed versus size. Like the Clippers, they start the year 6-21. They've been a lot better, but they are slow. They're a slow team. Then you have the team like the Nuggets. The Nuggets are on the slow side, but Jokic can be fast for a center at times. Aaron Gordon isn't exactly a slow athlete per se. So they're big, but on the slower side. Then we go all the way to the other end of the spectrum where you have teams that are very, very quick, like the Thunder. The Thunder have become a horizontality kind of benchmark. Like, how are we going to blanket the floor? How are we going to use our length and our quickness to overcome not having a ton of vertical size? I just think that's an entire subplot in some of these matchups where the pace of the game and the ability to execute playoff game plans where you ask defenders to cover a huge amount of the court, taking away the space that superstars want to get in the playoffs. To me, that's a takeaway with that Knicks Spurs game, and how are the Spurs going to handle that? And can the Knicks actually do this against some of these Eastern Conference opponents that they're going to have to play?
I think you talk about speed as well. The Celtics come to mind in how they're able to execute their actions. And I think we can't say enough about Derrick White recently, but the way that he's able to quickly get off the ball, catches the ball, shoots it, makes a decision, passes or something like that is so key to what they're able to do. And teams, you can just see them being like flabbergasted against some of these sets. Like one of their sets, like watching the 76ers, they ran it a couple of times. They, Hauser goes up and there's like three guys without the ball over on this side of the court. You got the ball handling guy, got somebody in the weak corner. These three guys are over here. Hauser's going to set a rip screen, and then the big that's there, Vucevic, Keita, is going to set some kind of a screen for Hauser to curl off to get a three, right? And the 76ers and other teams that have seen this kind of action just struggle so much knowing where to go. They're like, all right, do we send people down towards the rim so Keita doesn't roll and throw it down on everyone? Do we send people up to Hauser so he doesn't hit a three, but then it opens up space in the paint? And those decisive actions that the Celtics are able to do over and over, they remind me of the Pacers last year in the way that they're getting into some of these actions where Tyrese Halliburton is probably just, it breaks my heart. He's not here in the league right now, but the king of just pushing the pace on these actions and making decisions and making defenses be like, oh my God, what are we supposed to do here? And so I think the Celtics are kind of the leader in the clubhouse in terms of speed of their offensive actions. Because I just think the Thunder can sometimes get a little ground into the mud offensively. Maybe defensively it's a different story, but offensively the Celtics strike me as the speediest of the teams.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm thinking about literal foot speed in covering the floor as well as the speed of actions. That's really interesting. Okay, to support us, patreon.com/thinkingbasketball. It's the best way to do it. That's where you can get our extra member content, including the videos. We'll have the Derrick White video, or depending on where you're listening to it, the Derrick White video will already be out. Our latest deep dive on a game from a player. Patreon.com/thinkingbasketball. Cody, we are in the post show. I watched a comedy film this week.
Oh, what did you watch?
Yes, I watched a movie. Let me make sure I get this. Let me make sure I get this right. Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret.
I love that movie. Love is Strong. I like that movie.
It's from 2023.
Yeah, it is.
And it was. I would say I loved it. It's not going to be for everyone, but it does an amazing job of capturing these little moments and tensions and interpersonal dynamics between different personalities, people pleasers, and religious zealots, and there's all kinds of interesting dynamics packed around this sort of like coming of age junior high girl experience. So, but it's a comedy and it's from 2023, and there were definitely moments where I was cracking up for extended periods. It's got Kathy Bates in it. I mean. So I thought of you. I was like, I found a comedy. I think my wife was motivated by your question. She's over here like looking up comedies all week that we could try to watch that were from the last decade. Yeah.
We almost need to like build a list of the best comedies of the last decade, even the last this decade itself, right? Like trying to get those out there. Honestly, I like the movie. I don't remember thinking it's particularly funny. Like I think it's funny enough, but I think it gets most of its excitement for me from the dramatic tension that comes from it, and like the awkwardness that comes from like the adolescent mind. And Rachel McAdams, I think, really puts in just a fantastic performance. Especially, I think she was the standout.
Oh my God, yeah, she's great. But that's what I'm saying. It gets back to what we were saying about having different senses of humor for comedy films, but also in this particular case, I think there's an element of the dramatic observation that moves into humor for me. But if you're an audience member and you're not appreciating like the sensitivity of a people pleaser trying to balance her child and her mother and the PTA and like her friend's mother and like how the heck you handle that social soup, then it won't be funny. But I just thought the film just captured those little awkward moments brilliantly. in addition to being sort of a feel-good, nice, heartwarming film. So now the question that everyone wants to know: did you do your homework this week? Did you watch the film Burning?
Okay. Here's the thing. There's limited time for movie watching, especially during the NBA season. It doesn't work.
It snowed, and yes, keep going.
I didn't get to it. Hopefully, at some point, I will get to it. Maybe in this next week, I'll try to assign it. I did watch a new movie I've never seen. It seems up my alley, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe I missed it. But I watched Contagion for the first time.
Oh, right? Yes, the COVID documentary. Yes.
So this is interesting. You said this because my wife's watching with me. And she's like, wait a second, was this made in like 2022? And I was like, no, it's like a 2011 movie.
Yeah.
And here's the weird thing. I actually think I liked it less because I couldn't separate it from the fact that it seemed like it was a post-COVID movie. So I wish I'd seen it a decade ago. I wish I had seen it like closer to when it came out because I think I would have appreciated it more. Beyond that, like one of my faves, like I'll watch anything with Matt Damon. I'll watch anything with Odysseus in it. I didn't love his performance in it. I was a little like, there's a couple points where I'm like, I'm just not particularly feeling this performance.
Yes.
So I walked away not as excited about it as I thought I was going to be going into it.
No, I think that's a very real challenge that has to be navigated or understood when you watch a film before or after giant real life events that influence that film happen is going to change your perception. You just can't undo that. So I remember I won't say who it is, but another basketball writer and podcaster who exists once told me that he never watched Top Gun growing up, and then he watched Top Gun later on, and he's like, what is the deal with Top Gun? This movie's not very good. And I'm like, okay, so I guess you missed it. Maybe you had to be there in the 80s with like the first time you've ever been in a fighter jet. And that's another thing. The first time a film does something and presents it to an audience, there is a groundbreaking sort of novel sense that you can't recreate. But if you come along 20 years later and it's been completely used in every other landscape, it's been mocked, it's derivative, everything's derived based on it. You know what I'm trying to say? Then it doesn't have the same originality and panache. There's also no way to sort of replace that as well. I think these are just all realities of the different subjective experiences we have when we interact with art like that.
I'm not trying to make this a basketball thing, but I actually think there's a direct relationship between that idea and what you see with the NBA.
And role players.
Yeah. So but when you see the original, after seeing all the iterations, because that's the thing, is like when you have all of history that you can build on artistically, athletically, things like that, people can, like, just because something's derivative of something else doesn't necessarily mean it's worse. And sometimes it can actually take an idea and change it into a modern context in a way that is quote unquote better, or at least more interesting to that modern audience. So when you go back and you see the original, you're kind of like, oh, that's weird. I've seen this thing iterated on multiple times, but this original one doesn't quite do it as much as some of these ones in the modern context. Like Julius, or like Dr. J, going back and watching the 70s. Like you watch 70s basketball and I'm like, this isn't my style. Like some of these guys, I feel like they could outdo what Dr. J is doing. But when you see somebody doing it for the first time, right? When you see Star Wars for the first time, and then it just becomes the sci-fi flick that everything iterates on, I guess it kind of loses its luster when you backtrack 50 years and check something out like that. So I think that's a really interesting comparison point between the two.
I think this is also why you get the tension between generations, because, and I'm going to tie this to Michael Jordan and LeBron James in a second. When you grow up with the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s style of basketball, and the camera is much closer to the court, and the crowd noise is much louder, and the crowds themselves are much louder and more engaged because they're not on their phones all the time. They're not a bunch of corporate seats. They're just a bunch of drunk people who want to yell at the round ball. And you grow up with that sensation around sports, and basketball is a very vertical game. It's a very aerial game. And then you turn the game on 20 years later. And one of the things, I have a family member who was a casual fan who didn't watch for a long time. And then he turned the game on 20 years later, and he's got excited. But one of the first things he said to me was, why are the players so small? And I said, they're not. The camera's zoomed out like 80 feet compared to what you're used to seeing. because we have to see not only the 3-point line, but we have to see 10 feet beyond the 3-point line.
Mhm.
And so if you come from that generation and you grow up on that, that's the flavor you grew up with. That's the flavor you want and you yearn for and you have nostalgia around. Flip it around. When you don't grow up with that and you grow up with today's game, this is normal, and you go back, you're like, what is going on? These guys, they can't dribble, they can't shoot, the camera's all zoomed in, I can't see the 3-point line. What's going on? And I think this applies to so many things. And I think this is actually why the Jordan LeBron thing is this generational divide. People saw Jordan growing up. They had this experience that was novel. Oh my God, I've never seen anything like this. This is truly the greatest athlete I've ever seen in the 20th century. There is a mystique around it that feels real. Whether it is or not, it feels real. And then this generation, the younger generation who kind of rock with LeBron, they didn't get to experience that. And they're just being told, like, nah, you guys missed the greatest thing. It's over. And they're like, what do you mean? I have this awesome thing. I go back and watch this other thing. I don't get it. I think this is a similar dynamic in sports as well.
I get that, being frozen in history and thinking that something is so good that you won't accept anything ever being better. And in the movie world, for me, like, I'm going to take the Lord of the Rings trilogy, for instance. I basically can't watch any other fantasy stuff. I haven't seen a second of Game of Thrones or any of the spinoffs. I haven't seen basically any, like, I hated the Hobbit series. Like, any other kind of fantasy thing, I'm just like, I'm out, because in my opinion, like, Lord of the Rings is perfect. Like, I'm like, this can't be beat. So I get the mentality that some of these people have. Like, I talk to older generations that are like, oh my God, no one's going to pass Jordan. It's like, why? He's just a player that played basketball. Like, there's nothing inherently goated about Michael Jordan, right? But when I think about Lord of the Rings, I think about it in that sense too, because I have the same mentality. I'm like, you just can't surpass this. So I'm just not going to accept that anything can be better than it in terms of like a fantasy epic.
Exactly. That's a mystique. That's the mystique right there, where it's like, it actually doesn't matter how they play. They've achieved a narrative structure that for you is Lord of the Rings. I was going to actually say for you, it sounds like it's Odysseus. I mean, you're giving Matt Damon credit. He hasn't even done the role yet. The movie hasn't even come out yet. You're like, Matt Damon is Odysseus. The man can do no wrong because of your love of Odysseus. I experienced this, unfortunately, with Battlestar Galactica because I love sci-fi. And one of the primary writers on that is a longtime great sci-fi writer and did a ton of next generation stuff on Star Trek. And I never watched Battlestar Galactica live, and I went back and watched it, and I'm like, I can't watch this. It's completely dated. The dialogue is from like 30 years. No one acts like this anymore, and the plot doesn't really rapidly move along every week. So we've got like some plot stuff, and then a bunch of filler, and then some plot stuff, and I'm like, I can't do it anymore. So it's hard. It feels like an inescapable thing. It feels like an inescapable gravity. Cody, I've got a very important stat before we wrap up the show. Harrison Barnes is not going to play tonight. When was the last time Harrison Barnes did not play in an NBA game that he was scheduled to play in?
Harrison Barnes. This is a whiplash question. I don't know how we got from Battlestar Galactica.
This is huge. This is huge. Harrison Barnes. Yeah, go ahead. You know,
he's not the preeminent Iron Man in the league. I think it's Mikal Bridges.
I think Mikal is ahead of him. Yeah.
So I'm gonna guess, because the record, like, AC Green's like 1,100 games or something like that. I'm gonna guess like the last time Harrison Barnes did not play in a game would it have been in like 2023 is my guess.
2021 was the last time Harrison Barnes missed a game. He had played 364 consecutive games heading into tonight. Yeah,
that's incredible. I think
I was just going to say, no one will top AC Green's abstinence superpower of 1,100 straight games. Yeah. What were you going to say?
I was going to end cap the movie conversation and say, we talked about comedies. I think we need to bring up sci-fi, because I think we have a shared love of sci-fi stuff, and I'm sure we can.
Maybe next week. All right. That was a lot of fun as always. Thanks for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And of course that you are having a great day.